When I was 12, the night my brother disappeared unfolded like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. It started with the worst fight I'd ever seen, my brother, Daniel, red-faced and shaking, shouting at our dad in the kitchen. Dad's voice was lower, but somehow more dangerous, clipped words echoing off the linoleum. The kind of argument where you could almost see the air crackling with things that would never be unsaid. I watched from behind the doorframe, clutching a chipped mug I'd forgotten to put away. It was thunderstorm dark outside, but inside the house, the only storm was right there in that kitchen. Daniel's fists were balled at his sides. Dad leaned heavy on the counter, armor-plated in silence except for one final, shattering command, "Get out, Daniel. If you can't respect this family, you can't stay." Daniel's reply was a look, a punch of betrayal, and then the sound of the front door slamming so hard it rattled the windows. The rest moved in a blur. Mom sobbing into the phone, neighbors' porch lights flickering on one by one. Rain streaking down the glass as police cars lined our street, red and blue lights painting the walls with dread. They searched the woods and the old canal, but no trace, not a single footprint. His phone and wallet were still in his room, his bed unmade like he'd meant to come back. The days crawled by, grief piling up in the rooms, until only silence was left. I grew up with that silence, an invisible bruise pressed deep under my ribs. My parents never spoke of that night again. At 14, I learned to tiptoe around certain questions and lock away memories like forbidden treasures. But the ache lingered. I'd catch myself staring at Daniel's old baseball glove, or the dented spot in the hallway where he'd thrown his backpack every afternoon, and wonder, did he really choose to vanish, or was there more to the story? Every birthday, every empty chair at holidays, sharpened that ache into something almost sacred. The mystery was a shadow that shaped me, even as I tried not to look directly at it. 12 years slipped by. Now, I'm back in the house, the prodigal daughter come home, not for answers, but because Dad broke his hip and someone had to help. The place hasn't changed much. The wallpaper in the hallway is still peeling at the edges. My old bedroom smells faintly of must and childhood dreams. But the biggest thing is Daniel, his ghost is everywhere. His muddy sneakers still sit by the back door. His senior year trophy keeps its eternal vigil on the mantle, polished but untouched. Dad and I orbit each other like mismatched planets. Sometimes we try for small talk, weather, groceries, the price of heating oil, but it always dies out. One night while I was making tea, he said, "Your brother liked sugar in his tea. You don't." He looked at me, then looked away, and the silence settled in like dust motes. We live together, but we're both alone, tiptoeing over decades of unfinished sentences. The tension isn't just emotional, it's physical. There's a heaviness to the house now, like it's been holding its breath since Daniel left. Every time I pass his bedroom, the door closed tight, my hand itches to open it. I haven't, not yet. I tell myself I'm respecting privacy, but really, I'm afraid of what I might find. Or not find. It was the basement that started everything. I'd gone down there to clear out the boxes and mop up after one of Dad's increasingly frequent spills. The air was thick, dust swirling in the slanted light from a grimy window. My sneakers scuffed across the cold cement. I started moving boxes, old Christmas decorations, my mom's wedding dress in a mildewed box, stacks of yellowing newspapers. When I leaned against the far wall, something gave way with a hollow thunk. I froze. There was a panel, painted to look like the rest of the wall, but not quite right. Heart thudding, I knocked again. It echoed, deeper this time. My instincts screamed that I should leave it alone, but my hand reached out anyway, fingers tracing the seam. I pressed, and the panel shifted, opening just enough to reveal a narrow, pitch-black passageway. My skin prickled. The air that rushed out was musty, old, but, strangely, threaded with something sharper. A trace of heat, and, unmistakably, the smell of bread. Fresh, still sweet. I stepped back, pulse hammering. There was no way this place had seen daylight in decades, so why did it smell like someone had just eaten here? I strained to listen, the silence ringing loud in my ears. I glanced behind me, half expecting to see someone looming at the top of the steps. "Hello?" My voice cracked, barely a whisper, swallowed by the darkness ahead. No answer, just the distant hum of the laundry machine upstairs, and the familiar creak of the pipes. I should have run. I should have called someone. But I just stood there, staring into that secret, hungry dark, and realized, whatever happened here, whatever happened to Daniel, I was finally standing at the threshold of the truth. And someone, maybe, didn't want me to find it. That's when I heard the quietest scrape from somewhere inside the passage, a sound that could have been a mouse, or something much, much bigger. The house was so different at night. I could hear the creaks and sighs of the old wood beneath my feet, and every shadow seemed to crawl across the hallway. I waited until my dad's bedroom light flicked off and his old radio started playing that quiet jazz he always used to lull himself to sleep. My heart pounded in my throat, hands clammy as I tiptoed down the stairs. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there, even though I knew Mom was at her sister's across town, and it was just Dad and me tonight. I eased open the basement door, wincing at the faint squeal of the hinges. The air down there was thick with dust and the faint, metallic scent of old pipes. I flicked on my phone's flashlight and found the spot behind the broken shelving, where I'd seen the strange crack in the wall earlier that day. My fingers traced the seam. I pushed, and the hidden door gave way with a low groan, stale air rushing out like a sigh that had been trapped for decades. Inside, it was colder, almost damp. My beam swept across the small space. A musty mattress in the corner, faded and sunken in the middle, with a pile of thin, scratchy blankets heaped on top. Next to it, a stack of old clothes. I picked up a hoodie and felt a jolt, recognizing the faded band logo on the back. My brother's favorite, the scent of old cologne, undercut by dust, caught in my nose. I knelt and noticed a battered composition notebook tucked beneath the mattress. My hands shook as I opened it. The handwriting was instantly familiar, a mixture of sharp and looping letters that used to fill the margins of my brother's homework. But the entries were off. The sentences rambled, unfinished, as if he'd started writing thoughts he couldn't bear to finish. Unfinished business, the first entry repeated, over and over, before trailing off into a shaky line. Someone's watching me, I hear them at night. Don't trust. That one stopped abruptly. I skimmed further, my pulse roaring in my ears. Some entries were just dates and times. Others mentioned, the watcher, and, the key. The more I read, the more my hands trembled. I could hear my own shaky breath echo in the tight space. By now, sweat was trickling down my neck despite the chill. I wanted to run upstairs, lock my bedroom door, and pretend I'd never found this place. But I couldn't. Not now. Not with so many questions swirling in my head. I snapped some photos with my phone, stuffed the notebook under my jacket, and slipped back out, careful to nudge the secret door until it looked undisturbed. My mind wouldn't shut off as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I could still feel the texture of the notebook's worn cover in my palm, the scent of mildew clinging to my clothes. My brother had been here. Recently, maybe. Or, was someone else living in that room now? The idea made my skin crawl. I couldn't sleep. By dawn, my nerves were raw, but I'd made up my mind. Dad knew something. He had to. I found him in the kitchen, hunched over his mug, the radio murmuring low in the background. The sunlight made the lines on his face seem deeper than ever. He almost flinched when I sat down, like he'd already guessed what was coming. Dad, I said, voice barely above a whisper. My throat was dry. There's a room in the basement. Behind the shelves. His hand jerked, coffee sloshing into the saucer. He looked at me over the rim of his mug, eyes wide. What are you talking about? He asked, but his voice was tight, brittle. I slid the notebook across the table. This was in there. It's his, isn't it? He stared at the cover for a long, long moment. His knuckles went white on the mug. That room's always been there, he muttered. Even before we moved in. It's just old junk. Dad. I leaned forward, searching his face. Don't lie to me. When's the last time you were down there? Who was staying in that room? He shook his head, unable to meet my eyes. I told you. I don't know what you're talking about. But his hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the mug. His gaze darted to the door, like he was weighing whether to bolt. I pressed harder. Was Matthew there? Did you know he was still here, after all this time? His jaw went rigid. Matthew left. A long time ago. He didn't want to be around us anymore. Each word sounded forced, like it hurt him to say it. The silence stretched between us, heavy as lead. Finally, I said, Dad, if you're hiding something, you have to tell me. Please. My voice cracked at the end. He closed his eyes. For a second, I thought he might actually confess. But then he just stood up, set his mug in the sink, and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the notebook, and 1,000 new questions. I spent the rest of the day jumping at shadows, both furious and terrified. The sound of Dad's footsteps overhead made me flinch. Every time the house settled, I wondered if someone was in the walls, listening. By midnight, I was wound so tight I couldn't sit still. I was pacing my room, the notebook open on my desk, when my phone buzzed. A blocked number. I frowned. Who would be calling me so late? I hesitated, then answered. Nothing at first. Then, a rasping, metallic voice, distorted, like someone was speaking through a cheap voice changer. Stop looking. You're in danger. My throat clenched. Who is this? Leave it alone. You're not ready for the truth. Go back to your old life, before you end up like him. A hiss of static, then the line went dead. My hands were numb. I stared at the phone, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was a prank. But who would know to call me now? Who would know? I ran to the window and yanked the curtains aside. The street outside was empty, just the yellow glow of the lamplight and the distant hum of a car engine somewhere down the block. My reflection looked pale and wild-eyed in the glass. Was I being watched? Had someone seen me sneaking into the secret room? I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my brother's handwriting, unsteady, desperate, and heard that voice hissing in the dark. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind again. I was going back down there, no matter what. The basement felt even colder that morning. The air tasted flat, almost electric. I crept back to the hidden door, my hands shaking. I pushed inside, phone flashlight sweeping the corners. Everything looked the same, but then I noticed a tiny, blinking red light on the far wall, half hidden behind a paint can. My skin prickled. I knelt and squinted. It was a pinhole camera, one of those mini spy gadgets you see in bad movies. The lens stared back at me, unblinking. I reached behind and found a memory card slot, the card still warm from recent use. I hurried back upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and slid the card into my laptop. The first video was blackness, then a jumbled shot of someone moving into the room, head ducked and face hidden under a hoodie. The camera's field of view was small, just enough to show the mattress and the door. I scrubbed through hours of empty footage, then, a few days ago, a figure slipped in, moved quickly, and ducked out. It could have been anyone. The only detail I caught was a scar along their left forearm, exposed when they reached for the notebook. My mouth went dry. That notebook, the one I'd stolen. Someone had been here, maybe just before me. Or after. What if it was my brother? My mind spun with possibilities. Or, what if it was someone else entirely, using his old things as cover? I watched the clip again. The figure paused, as if listening for footsteps above. Then, with a quick, practiced motion, they slipped out of the frame and the door swung shut. The timestamp was only 4 days old. 4 days. I felt that creeping paranoia again. Someone was still using the room. Someone who didn't want to be found. The notebook was still spread out on my desk, pages covered in my brother's familiar scrawl. I studied the entries again, squinting at the margins. That's when I noticed it, tiny marks at the end of each page, almost like tally marks. Some letters were oddly capitalized, and there was always a sequence of numbers at the bottom of certain entries. It wasn't random. I could feel it. I scribbled everything onto a fresh sheet of paper, rearranging the letters and numbers. After an hour of sweat and frustration, I realized it was a code, a simple substitution cipher, just like the puzzles my brother used to make when we were kids. When I cracked it, my heart lurched. The message was short, hurried, Dad's drawer. Key to all. Trust no one. My blood ran cold. Dad's bedroom. He always kept it locked, even when Mom complained it was weird. I pictured the heavy oak dresser, the top left drawer with its old brass lock. I hesitated. Breaking into Dad's room felt like a line you can't uncross. But the image of my brother's frantic handwriting, and the memory of that warning call, kept pushing me forward. I needed answers. I waited until Dad left for his morning walk, a daily ritual, rain or shine. I crept down the hall, every creak of the floorboard making my heart thud. The door was unlocked for once, but the drawer was sealed tight. I dug through the closet, desperate, and found an old paperclip. My hands shook so badly that it took 3 tries, but finally the lock popped open with a tiny click. Inside, there were stacks of papers, old bills, a yellowed photo of my parents on their wedding day, and something wrapped in an oilcloth. I pulled it out, heart hammering. Inside the cloth was a second notebook, smaller and older, the pages stiff with age. And a single, battered key. I stood there for a long moment, the morning light spilling across my hands, the old house silent around me. I knew this was just the beginning, that every answer would only lead to more questions. But I also knew I couldn't stop now. Not after everything I'd seen. Not with the truth so close I could almost taste it. And as I held the key, I couldn't help but wonder, what doors in this house, or in our lives, had my family kept locked all these years? My hands shook as I slid open the battered old drawer beneath the tiny desk. Dust plumed up, catching the afternoon sun that now streamed in through the lone, cobwebbed window. Inside, bundled with a cracked rubber band, were faded Polaroids, a stack of yellowed envelopes, and a thin, spiral-bound notebook. I thumbed through the photos first, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My brother, older than I'd last seen him, beard scruffy, standing here in this very room, sometimes with Dad beside him. They looked tired, but in one picture, they almost looked relieved. I reached for the letters next. The paper felt soft and fragile against my skin. Most were in Dad's handwriting, his blocky, familiar scrawl. The first line made my breath catch. If you're reading this, you deserve the whole truth. My eyes danced over the words, piecing together a story I'd never imagined. My brother, after that explosive argument, hadn't just run away. He'd told Dad about threats from someone he'd once called a best friend, a friend who had spiraled out of control, gotten into bad things, and started turning up at our house, demanding money, making veiled threats. Dad hadn't called the police. He believed my brother was in real danger, and instead, they had made a plan. This secret room, hidden behind cracked paneling and the false closet wall, became their safe house. For months, my brother stayed here, slipping out only at night, Dad bringing him food and news. All those nights I thought Dad was just going for a drive or out to the garage, he was helping my brother survive. The notebook held my brother's handwriting, rough and rushed. The last entry was from 5 days ago. To whoever finds this, I'm safe now. I'm sorry for the hurt. I'll explain, if you want to meet. I'll be here Sunday, after dark. The date was today. I just stood there for a minute, holding onto the desk for support, the old wood biting into my palm. The room felt smaller somehow, as if the walls themselves were closing in with all the secrets they'd held for years. My legs didn't want to move, but I made myself leave, heart hammering, the house suddenly echoing with every creak and groan. That night, I couldn't eat. Every noise in the house pricked my ears, every shadow seemed to move. When the clock finally crawled past 10, I crept back to the old closet and stepped through the gap into the secret room. My phone flashlight swept over the walls, chasing dust motes. Then I heard it, a soft cough, the scrape of a shoe on the warped floor. My brother stood there, older and gaunter than I remembered, eyes glistening in the pale beam. The silence was so thick I thought I'd choke on it. "Hey," he said, voice hoarse. I wanted to scream at him, hug him, punch him, cry. Instead, I just whispered, "You were here the whole time?" He nodded, then looked away. "I couldn't let that guy hurt you. Or Dad." He was serious, and I messed up. Dad said it was the only way. But why not tell me? My voice broke on the last word. He rubbed his face, the skin raw and tight. I was going to. Dad wanted to wait until it was safe, but I didn't know how to come back after so long. "I thought you'd hate me." For a moment, we both just stood in that tiny room, surrounded by years of dust and secrets. "I hated you for leaving," I said, my voice cracking. "But not as much as I missed you. I thought you were dead." He stepped forward, arms trembling, and we hugged, awkward and desperate, all those years of anger and grief tangled up in one shaky embrace. I heard him sob softly against my shoulder. We talked for hours, piecing together what we'd both lost. He apologized for the pain, for the silence, for all the birthdays and holidays missed. I told him about the ways his absence had carved holes in our family. We argued, cried, laughed when it all got too heavy, and by the time dawn edged its way through the grimy window, we both looked wrecked but lighter. Dad joined us that morning, eyes red but finally honest for the first time in years. He admitted how scared he'd been, how he'd wanted to protect us both, no matter the cost. There were more apologies, awkward silences, but also a sense that the three of us might finally be able to move forward. The house feels different now. Some rooms still hold echoes of secrets and lies, but others are filled with the sound of real voices, real conversations. I find myself noticing the way the morning light hits the hallway, the smell of coffee from the kitchen, the warmth of laughter, even if it's still a little shaky. I don't know if we'll ever be the same family we were, but maybe that's not the point. What matters is that the truth is out, finally, and we're facing it, together. I've learned that secrets only protect you for so long, and forgiveness isn't a single moment, but a choice you make every day. And this old house, haunted as it is, finally feels like a place where we can all breathe.